It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for another episode of Millzy Brews, the show where I brew a deck for you on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. This week on the channel, we're doing Innistrad week. We're brewing for commanders on Innistrad, mostly with Midnight and Crimson Vow, just because I didn't really have a chance to brew in those sets on Millzy Brews on this show. And there's a lot of commanders from those sets that I really wanted to try out. And it wouldn't be right if we didn't do vampires. I think when we think of Innistrad, we think of a couple tribes specifically. Humans, I'm not doing one this week, but I have Kyler on the channel if you guys want to check that out. Vampires, which we're going to do today, zombies, which we've done already this week on the channel, and werewolves, which we did already this week on the channel. The last video this week, if you're keen, you should be able to pick out who that commander or who that commander may be, depending on what tribe that is coming. The last of the big tribes on Innistrad. Today we're doing something fun, and that's because it'd be really easy in this slot to pick Strafan, who was our pre-con commander for vampires. It'd be pretty easy to pick Olivia or to pick plenty of other things. Rest in peace to my boy Audric. Anyway, but I wanted to go ahead and pick a vampire that probably a ton of people aren't paying attention to, probably because, well, his other card is one of the single best commanders of all time. So it makes sense that people really weren't paying attention to Edgar. But we're going to do Edgar Charmed Groom today. Legendary creature, vampire noble, 4/4 for 4. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. When it dies, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, and you get Edgar Markov's Coffin. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature with lifelink and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. Then if it has 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it back. Okay, black-white vampires. We got some token stuff. But, you know, the thing to remember about vampires is a lot of these tokens have lifelink. So I think not the pretty obvious choice, the choice I chose to go with was lifegain, or more specifically, lifegain that hurts our opponents too. So, yeah, black-white lifegain is, of course, a very popular archetype. So why not we try to confine it to just vampires? This is a vampire tribal deck, so let's see what we can do. Land base, I've tried my best to put up what I think is a fairly respectable white-black land base. We got Phyrexian Tower coming in here to help us sacrifice some creatures for mana if we need it. Cavernous Souls is going to work great in this deck because we have all vampires. Same thing with Path of Ancestry, you're going to work great because we can get all of our colors, and good part of Cavernous Souls is hopefully we can stop our creatures from getting countered. Rocking into the enchantments, we got a couple different things. Johnny's welcome. We're probably going to end up putting a bunch of creatures or tokens into play, so this is going to gain us life every time we put a token in. Authority of the Consuls gains us a life every time an opponent's creature comes in, but they come in tapped. Cleric class says whenever we gain a life, we gain that much +1 life, and then once we level it up, we can actually get a +1/+1 counter every time we gain life, which is pretty darn good. Annoying Procession going to double the amount of tokens we create, which we're going to be creating a lot of them from different sources. I really had considered. Oh, I did put Mondrak. Okay, I thought I did. I just wasn't sure. In here as well to double the amount of tokens. Bash Remembrance. This is going to kind of help us on our potential little Everscratch theme. With some other cards, whenever a creature we control dies, his opponent loses a life and we gain a life. The best part of that is a lot of our abilities say whenever you gain life, an opponent loses a life. So Bash Remembrance turns into really a lose 2, gain 1 instead of just lose 1, gain 1. Black Market Connections gives us some draw, gives us some treasures if we need it. I really like it. And we can also make vampires with the last ability if we really want to. Campaign of Vengeance. An expensive enchantment. Once we get it out, when a creature we control attacks, defending player loses a life and we gain a life. The best part is the wider we go, the better this card gets and the more life our opponents lose. Etchings of the Chosen. Pick a creature type. They all get +1/+1. 1, sacrifice a creature of the chosen type. Target creature you control gains indestructible on the turn. So we can protect some creatures that way. Legion's Landing, comes in, makes a 1/1 with lifelink, and then when we flip it over, it becomes into a land, but for 3, we can make another 1/1 with lifelink. Radiant Destiny, one of my favorite enchantments from the whole Ixalan block. When it comes in, you choose a creature type. Creatures of that type get +1/+1, and then as long as you have the city's blessing, they have vigilance, and that's going to be great with all of our tokens. Smothering Tithe going to give us all those treasures, help us get forward on the game plan. And then Meat Hook, not only is it removal, but it works for this Aristocrat's sub-plan where opponents lose a life every time a creature we control dies. And then we're playing the classic combo, the classic enchantment combo, Exquisite Blood. Each time an opponent loses life, we gain that much life in Sanguine Bond. And whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Of course, paired them together, and any gain of life from us or any loss of life for our opponent will start a loop to ping all of our opponents out. Both of them work so well with all of our abilities because they're just going to gain us incremental damage. If it's when we gain life, or we're just going to have some opponents lose that life in the process. If it's Exquisite Blood, every time we deal damage to our opponents, we're getting life back. So you can see there's a great kind of feedback loop that gets created on that. Mana artifacts, we got Arcane Signet, Orzhov Signet, Phyrexian Altar, Soul Ring, and the Talisman. We're playing the Phyrexian Altar so we can sacrifice those tokens for some mana. We're playing Bantu's Monument because most of our creature spells are black. So what this is going to do is reduce them down, and then each time we do cast a creature spell, our opponent loses a life and we gain a life. We've got the Commander Sphere as well for some more mana tapping. And then we're playing Glasscast Heart. We're not playing a ton into the blood tokens, but what I do like about this is it says whenever one or more vampires you control attack, we get a blood token. So we're just gonna get them over time. Remember, we can use the blood tokens to loot, right? Discard a card and then draw something. Black 1, pay a life, create a 1/1 token with lifelink. That's great, so we can get one every turn with it, which is kind of nice. And then 2 black and 13 bloods. Everyone loses 13 and we gain 13. But I kind of like that 1 token per turn. And if we have either of our doublers out, that 1 token is turning into 2, right? And that's making it even better. Instance, and they saw No Fear. Probably should have had Flawless Maneuver in here as well, but I didn't think about it at the time. I think that would be pretty worth it, though. But just giving all of our creatures Indestructible Anguish on making one of the best removal spells in white-black. I'd kind of argue it's the best, just because it can hit literally anything. And it isn't a land, but that's what you want it to do when you lose 3 life. Daily Dispute, sack creature, draw 2, get a treasure, path, and swords for some removal. Teferi's Protection for some protection for everything. All of our things phase out. Our life can't change, and we gain protection, which is great. And then Village Rites, sack a creature and draw 2 cards. Again, we're gonna kind of have a bunch of creatures anyway, so I think Village Rites becomes even better. On the sorcery side, we're playing a lot of removal because, again, that's what we're going to kind of need to do. We want to push our opponents back down. Blood Tribute says target opponent loses half their life rounded up. If it was kicked, you gain life equal to the life lost this way, and the kick is just tapping on untap vampire control. That's pretty easy. And the cool part about this is they're losing life, so for the purpose of Exquisite Blood, we'll actually gain that life as well, but we're also gaining life. So this is great because with either of those 2 enchantments, we're going to end up gaining a ton of life this way. Or with Sanguine Bond, we could actually kill an opponent because they lose half their life rounded up. Sanguine Bond would see us gain that much life and allow us to deal that to somebody else, and it actually could just knock out an opponent outright. Call to the Feast, making 3 tokens with lifelink, again, gets even better with either of our doublers. Queen's Companion makes 2 tokens, again, gets better with either of our doublers. Our board wipes of choice are Farewell and Kaya's Wrath. Farewell is just going to ruin a lot of days. Exile artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and graveyards if we want to. Just nuke the board where it's at. It's a little bit less good for us because we have artifacts and enchantments we really want. But I think if we're to the point that we need to do it, we need to do it. And then Kaya's Wrath, destroy all creatures, and we gain life equal to the number of creatures we controlled that were destroyed. We don't mind that because they're probably just going to be tokens, and at least it gains us life in the process. Rite of Oblivion is one of my new favorite sorcery speed removals, and I know people have so much opinion about sorcery speed removal, but I think it's important in some senses. It's additional cost. We sacrifice an online permanent, exile an online permanent, and we can flash it back. And then we're playing the Vindicate as well, just destroy target permanent. I'd love to pull this. I mean, you could pull this and play an Utter End or something like that, but I wanted to try to kind of just diversify the removal. I don't want to keep all my removal the same. I'd consider Deadly Rollick as well, for sure. And so there's different removal here you can sub in and out. This is not a perfect list as far as removal goes. Black and White has access to so much great removal. Despark, Fracture, Vanishing Burst. There's so much great removal in these 2 colors. So I think what you need to do is just determine what removal suite you like the best and do it for that. Obviously, we could pull Rite of Oblivion out for something else or Vindicate out for something else. Again, I wanted to create a baseline so we could determine what's the most useful and what's not. And I think a lot of this removal gets changed around what your play group is. If your play group has a lot of creatures, well, then you obviously take Vindicate out for a Deadly Rollick or take Vindicate out for something like that. If you play a lot against a lot of permanents, well, then maybe you pull a Path of Exile or Swords out for Generous Gift or Utter End or something like that. So again, a lot of things can be moved around here. It's not like the removal here is set in stone, but I think because Black-White has access to so much good removal, you kind of have to think about what you want to do. All right, before we get into the creatures, I want to get into the Planeswalkers because we actually get to play my boy Sorin. We get to play him, and not only that, we get to play 3 of his cards because I think all 3 of them get us really huge benefit. Sorin the Mirthless can look at the top card. We can get it into our hand. If we do, we lose life. We go to its value. But the big one's that -2, I think, making us a token with flying and lifelink, and then that -7 can hurt an opponent if we can get up to it. Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, pretty great card. 3 mana for a 4 loyalty, +1 target creature you control gains Death Touch and lifelink until end of turn. If it's a vampire, you put a counter on it. This is great, just going to make one of our creatures even better. +1, you can sacrifice a vampire. When you do it, deals 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3 life. Well, we're probably going to have some tokens lying around, so that's pretty good. And then -3, you can put a vampire creature from your hand onto the battlefield. We can do this immediately when we set Sorin down. So we're playing a couple expensive vampires that we hope to not have to hard cast, but potentially with Sorin, we could get them down for even cheaper. And we're going to have plenty of creatures to kind of defend our Planeswalkers. And the last one, probably my favorite of the 3, not the best. I think Imperious Bloodlord's probably the best of the 3. But in this deck, I think Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord is my favorite. This is as long as it's your turn, creatures and Planeswalkers you control have lifelink. Everything has lifelink. And then it deals 1 damage to a target player. That's the +2. And then the -X can bring something back from the graveyard. The cool part is it says your graveyard, so we can just get anything we want back. And if it's not a vampire, it's a vampire in addition to its other types. Could be kind of fun with like Mondrak to bring it back and make it a vampire. All right, let's get into the creatures. There's a lot of really fun vampires in here, and I didn't realize how much this was actually going to be a pretty cool combination of vampires that I didn't really expect. First off, we're playing Astarion the Decadent from Baldur's Gate. Death Touch lifelink, 4/4 for 6. At the end of our end step, target opponent loses life. You go to the amount of life they lost this turn, or you gain life. You go to the amount of life you gain this turn. Pretty fun. It's a decent body, but I think that ability can kind of catch some people off guard. If we're able to do a ton of damage to someone at our end step, we could knock somebody out. The damage. Blood Artist, the classic vampire for this strategy whenever another creature dies. Or it dies, target player loses a life and you gain a life. This is good board wipe protection because it's going to count every creature dying. I'm going to do a ton of damage to our opponents. Bloodline Keeper taps on the front side to put a vampire flying on the battlefield. Or once you flip it over, it pumps all of our creatures while doing it. It's a good vampire. It's flying. It doesn't have lifelink, but I think it could pump out tokens that are going to help us out with other things. Captivating Vampire. A good board pump for the rest of our vampires. And then if we tap 5 vampires we control, we gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. This could be very beneficial depending on what our opponents have and what we can get from it. Cliffhaven Vampire, whenever we gain life, each opponent loses a life. These are the abilities that we want to farm as much as possible. Gain these little incremental life. Think about it. If we attack with 5 life linkers, and we gain life 5 times, each of our opponents is now losing 5 life just because we gain that 1 life from the life link. So these are the effects we want to hoard and absolutely make them work. Cordial Vampire, whenever it or another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire control. It's going to make these huge. It's going to make them really tough to deal with. Cruel Celebrant, when you enter another creature planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. This helps us with this little aristocratic theme, although we really want this more than we want this ability, but I think we still like it. Falconwrath Noble, whenever another creature dies, target player loses a life and you gain a life. Again, why lose out on the abilities we can have if we need to sacrifice things for our own good? Forerunner of the Legion, when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a vampire, reveal it, shuffle the library, and put it on top of it. And whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under control, target creature gets +1/+1 on turn. Forerunner is just a target. It is a search for any vampire in our deck, and it's going to become very important to get a couple of the vampires in our deck, and we'll point that out as we get there. I think things like Cliffhaven, those type of effects are one of them, but there's one or two I like a lot more. Gifted Aetherborn, just a Death Touch lifelinker, 2/3 for 2, perfect card on the ground. It gains its life. It has Death Touch, so it's a great blocker. Henrika Dothmani, Damnathi on the front side, we get to have a 1/3 flyer. A lot of the times we're probably going to transform it right away, but we could always draw a card and lose a life. But once it's on the backside, flying, death touch, lifelink, and then we can pump any of our creatures with flying, death touch, or lifelink for some mana. I love Henrika just because once it gets on that backside, it's a 3/4 body that does a lot of good. Indulgent Aristocrat, sacrificing a creature to put a counter on each vampire you control. This is great because our creatures are just going to kind of they're going to get bigger over time, especially with the counters and all these buffs that we have. Legion Lieutenant just going to buff the rest of our vampires. This is great because it's already what we want to do. Anyway, Malakir Bloodwitch, one of the cards that we hope to put down with Sorin. Or we can even get it back to Malakir Bloodwitch, 5 mana, flying protection from white. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control. You gain life equal to the life lost. This way, so if we have 5 vampires, everybody's losing 5, we're gaining 15. Malakir Bloodwitch is great. It's one of those ones we want to get back with Sorin. We want to be able to put down with the other Sorin. Like, this is one of those cards that could help us finish the game. Marauding Blade Police, whenever you gain life, each opponent loses life. Here's another one of these abilities. We love them, we love them, we love them, and we want to get as many of them as we can. Maverick Vein, Dusk Apostle. Whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1. So just going to get us some tokens. Mondrak going to double the amount of tokens we get when we make them, and we can make it indestructible. The other thing I like about this is if we use Sorin to bring this back, we can make it into a vampire, and then we get all these other vampire buffs with it. Otherwise, we just make double the tokens, and that's going to come in well. Nighthawk Scavenger, just a flying death touch lifelinker. They can be pretty big. And just going to be a great attacker. Sanctum Seeker, whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. This is great because this doesn't hit who they're attacking like the other one does. This just hits literally everyone when they attack, and it's so good, so good. This is one of those ones that we want to get with something like Forerunner Legion if we start building our board wide, because if we swing with 8 vampires, everyone's losing 8, we're gaining 8 before combat even starts, and that makes it so good. Twilight Prophet, one of my favorite vampires in the deck. Beginning of our upkeep, if we have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X, and we gain X, where X is that card's CMC. That card doesn't really have to have a pretty high mana value for this to be worth it. Because what we're going to do is just hit our opponents for a little bit, gain a little bit, get a extra card out of the process, right? Because this is before we draw. So we're going to actually get 2 cards that turn to draw, right? We don't draw the card, it's put in our hand, but if you think about it, we drew an extra one. And hopefully we hurt some people with it. Vampire Nighthawk, another similar to Nighthawk Scavenger, stuff, flying death touch lifelinker for a good body. Vampire the Dire Moon, death touch lifelink, 1/1. Again, we love these death touchers that can block well and potentially take our opponent's things out. Vindictive Vampire, whenever a creature you control dies, it deals 1 damage to your opponent and you gain a life. Again, here's another one of these aristocrat-y type abilities. Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, is another copy of one of our pretty enchantments there in the combo. It says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. But I think what's really important about this and Sanguine Bond with that ability is it's not something where we expect to just go off with exquisite blood right away. It's that incremental life loss that we're going to be giving to our opponents over the course of the game that I think makes it so good. Like, it's one of those things where over time we're going to slow burn our opponents as we're kind of doing the things we already want to do. And then Vran, Executioner Thane from Phryxia, whenever one more creatures you control die, each opponent loses 2 and you gain 2, and it only triggers once per turn. The good part is that's only once per each turn. So if we can do this on everyone's turn, we can start hurting people for more. And if this being only 2 mana means it's not going to be very hard to get down. But what do you guys think of Edgar? To be honest, like, this is a deck that, I'd played around with Black-White Clerics a lot, and that was a deck that I really enjoyed because it was very good at gaining life, but I kind of like this vampire theme. I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know how this deck plays, obviously, because I haven't tried it yet, but my guess would be that it functions probably pretty well compared to what we want it to do. The question just becomes, can we shore up? Can we make better those aristocratic sub-themes if we want to, or do we want to go more into the life gain, take some things out, put in the Aether Flux Reservoirs of the world, put in the Alhammert's Archives of the world, and kind of lean into the life gain? I'm not sure, because honestly, I don't know how the deck runs. I think I would learn a lot from just 1 or 2 tests of this deck to know whether that's the case or not. And if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to see what you think. Let me know down in the comments. What do you think of Edgar? What do you think of this deck? I've always liked Black-White, and I don't mind this approach to it. Give me a like if you like Edgar, if you like vampires, or you like this deck in general. Subscribe if you want to join me on my quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel, to always be brewing. And we are just 2 weeks away from March of the Machines content, and I can't wait. I already have plenty of commanders we've seen already that I want to brew and mess around with. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.